Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope. Nothing said on the Low Carb MD Podcast is medical advice. Please consult your own doctor before making any lifestyle changes.
Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD Podcast. Tro, gosh, we have a great guest today. I'm really excited. I was fortunate enough to have her on the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Now that was her warm up act. Now we get to both pick on her.
You know, I didn't realize she came on the podcast. I got to go listen to that one and get up to date on Life's Best Medicine. So I'm going to go catch that one. But I'm excited to have Jessyca Reynolds. Her talk on the cruise was so inspirational and so vulnerable. And I really resonated with it. And I know, Brian, when we talked, it resonated with you as well.
Not only that, Tro, my talk is called Strongholds and Footholds, right? Like her talk really inspired me to look at this and really understand like what these topics that we really, we spend so much time looking at the science and the data, and sometimes we forget about the human aspects and how life gets in the way. So Coach Jessyca, welcome. It's so awesome to have you. You really have inspired us. It's been amazing, your journey. And so let's start with that. Tell people who you are and your journey and what got you to where you're at now.
Well, who am I? I'm just a average person, really, but I am a transformed person. And what I want to say about that is transformations, you see them all the time. Change, you see before and afters where maybe someone has lost weight. And when I talk to people, I want them to see me as a transformation. I am truly a different person in my mind, in my spirit, and yes, also in my body. I was sick for a really, really long time. And up until I was 41, I'm 50 now. And I struggled with binge eating, anorexia, bulimia, compulsive overeating. My low weight was around 115. I'm almost 5'10". My high weight was over 309. So I was all over the place. At the point before I started to get better, I was on 17 medications a day. I was severely mentally ill. I had been through electric shock therapy and had a traumatic brain injury. I was actually disabled. So I've got all this story behind me. And I think a lot of times people see who I am today, and it's hard for them to even fathom who I was a little less than 9 years ago. But I am a coach. And what I do as a coach is I use my own experience and revelations that I have had in my own healing over the almost 9 years. And I've had the opportunity, and I'm so grateful to work with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And I think I figured out one time it was over 10,000 hours that I have spent working with people, just helping them through. It's less of the food part, because to me, that's not the hard part. That part's simple. But helping them with emotional and compulsive eating and the stumbling blocks and the long-term beliefs that they have that have to be uprooted in order for them to truly not just change, because if you change, you can change back. If you transform, you become something so utterly different that you can never go back to what you were. So I know that was a really long answer to a short question, but that's what I do, and that's who I am.
We like long answers. We like those long answers. People don't want to hear us; they want to hear you, right?
Yeah, and I would say that she's just not a normal person, right? You're a warrior. Like, you've been through a lot of stuff, and you just keep plugging forward. And that's the other inspiration, is just say, how do you, like, when you go off the rails for a while, how do you get back on? And you took some time out of the public spotlight because you were doing, you had life getting in the way, and so tell people a little bit about that.
Well, Dr. Brian, you and I talked, and I won't go into detail, but I went through some just personally excruciating things. And I was kind of in this space, the health space, the coaching space, and was doing a ton of podcasts and telling my story. And I went through some stuff that it should have just completely wiped me out. And again, that's how you know that you've been transformed, because there's never any thought during the worst times in life to go back to who you were. You simply can't. But I took time away to focus on my family, to heal some things, to work on myself, to get some balance with my work life. And I during that time, I actually became a real estate agent. And so I also do that now. And I really thought maybe like God's calling me not to do this anymore. Maybe that time in my life where I'm supposed to tell my story about and help other people through this thing, maybe that ended and something new has begun. But really what was happening during that period of time, I was being transformed further. And I had this greater revelation. I used to teach and I used to be very caught up in the sort of addict model of accept you're an addict and you're always going to have to be different than everybody else. And the greatest revelation that happened in those kind of 2 years or so, 2.5 years that I was away from this community, was that I started to understand the behaviors that we have are simply that. They are not who we are. And I started to feel very convicted of teaching this addiction thing, because it's true that certain foods are addictive. The foods are. But every time I call myself an addict, every time I say my addiction, it makes it feel like it's something that is me instead of something that's attached to me. So this revelation that I had was about strongholds. In the midst of the worst, literally the worst season of my life, I was able to stay with this. I was able to continue to eat well and not harm myself and not go back to who I was, because, and in fact, even I was brought to a greater level of understanding and revelation. And here I am back in this space somehow talking about it again. So it's where I'm supposed to be. I thought it was a door that had closed and it's open again. So I guess that's where I've been. And what caused me not to go off the rails is because I was so rooted in this. I had gone through a period of time where I understood that I never want to go back. I couldn't even fathom it. I almost don't recognize the person I used to be.
I want to take a second. It's just absolutely amazing. It resonates with me so much. I think part of the journey for most people is to understand that food addiction, stress, and mental health is probably at the root of our chronic disease epidemic.
Yes.
Right? Truly and fully. We need to stop thinking about it like a budgeting issue. We need to stop thinking about it like now, one of the issues which I think you highlighted here is, once you're an addict, does that empower you? Or does that victimize you?
Right. That's interesting, because I used to think it empowered me. The first time I sort of wrapped my arms around the fact that, hey, there's something wrong with me. It's not my fault. And therefore, I don't have to beat myself up about this behavior that I've had. Well, that's a good thing, right? I mean, if beating yourself up is not a good thing. But so I got a certain level of freedom with food by saying, yes, I'm an addict. This is the way I was born. I'm wired differently than other people. And I taught that. And there is a certain level of freedom because you do stop beating yourself up. The problem is, and I was part of, I've done every diet. I had 6 different eating disorder hospitals, 30 some therapists. So I've tried every technique. This is different, right? But so I remember going into Overeaters Anonymous and saying, I'm Jessyca, I'm an addict. I'm Jessyca. I'm bulimic. the more I said it, the more it became who I was, and it became an excuse for just always reverting back to that eventually. If it's who you believe you are, I don't care if you've learned a better way. In times of extreme stress, you're going to revert back to who you believe you are. If you can see the behavior problems as something that started very early as a root, it was a lie that planted a seed in your head about what food would do for you versus I was just born this way and I'm broken beyond repair and I can manage it with this diet, but I can't truly be free. If I can see that, even though for my whole life until I was 41 years old, I believed certain things about what food would do for me, but just because I believed it for 4 decades didn't make it true, and it didn't make it part of me. It was attached to me. And that's really that revelation that I'm talking about is, yes, it's freeing to say I'm an addict. It takes away some personal responsibility, but there is a greater level of freedom by saying, I have struggled with being addicted to food. I have struggled with these behaviors, but it is not who I am. And that's that greater level of freedom, because if it's not who I am, I can change it. If it's who I am, I really can't, because it's me.
This is such a hugely important topic, right? It's so important because I get it. You have to say, look, I do have food addiction issues going on, but you can't just say, well, every time things get hard, I just go back to that and I can't help it because I'm an addicted person. And the same thing, I mean, we hear it all the time, Trove. Some people say, well, I'm just lazy. I'm just this. I just don't follow up. I just can't stick to it. I could do it for 2 weeks and that's it. And then we convince ourselves of these things. And that's the power of our brain, right? And that's the addiction part. It's like, oh, you worked so hard all week. Jessyca, you did such a great job. You worked so great. You did so great all week. So now you can have your pizza and beer on Friday night because you did great for 4 or 5 days in a row, and then you deserve this. And like you talk about the lies of the enemy, and I think it's so important that we understand these strongholds that are these lies that we believe that I'm just a procrastinator. I show up late all the time for my appointments. You can't show up late to the airport. The airplane's going to leave without you, right? They're not waiting.
Like alarm bells go off in my mind, and maybe it's because I've talked to so many people, but like it's like alarm bells go off when someone says, I'm just and they fill in the blank. I'm this is who I am. Or they say, I always do this. Because the more you speak out, I always do this thing, the more likely it is you're going to always continue to do that thing. And what's actually happening when you do that, you are coming into agreement with an enemy voice that is trying to destroy you. And that's the reality. So if I'm coming into agreement with an enemy voice that's trying to destroy me, and then I'm speaking it out, it has power over me. And I guess I should explain this thing about strongholds. I really see it as at some point in our life, and you can have lots of strongholds, and they cannot be related to food. There's many, but at some point in your life, you experience something or you hear something, and that thing is a seed in your mind. And then over time, that seed grows and your experiences seem to verify that thing. And I love to use the simple example of, if you were 4 years old and you fell down and busted your knee, and your grandmother who loves you gave you a cookie and it seemed to help with pain. And then every single time I felt pain after that, I thought, I know what I need to help with my pain. I need a cookie. And so that tiny seed grows into a branch. And then every time I act on that and I'm verified that food, especially sugary, carby food, helps my pain, it wraps another layer around that thing until it becomes like this mighty, mighty tree. It's no longer a seed. It's no longer a twig. It's this mighty tree. But the important part is it's still rooted in a lie. The fact is that food never really helped my pain. It distracted me, and I believed that it was true. And so I think and I guess that's where I'm going with this, is that when something is a stronghold, it's rooted in a lie. And that can be any behavior in your life. Your behaviors have been wrapped around this thing. And, the longer you believe the lie, the harder it is to say, wait a second, you mean I've been wrong all this time? but there is a voice of the enemy, and it sounds like our voice. And one of the things that I teach people, and this is a huge part of the groups I teach, is identifying your voice, the voice of truth, versus the enemy's voice. And I have come up with all these things. I mean, you can tell it's the enemy when one of those things is the enemy's voice is always accusing. It's always like you. It always uses the second person. We don't think about ourselves in the second person. We say I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow. The enemy says, you don't need to go to the gym tomorrow. So the enemy always says you, and separating what your thoughts are, what you truly want from the enemy's voice is critical in overcoming these strongholds, because what we want to be free. We want to be well. And most people spend their whole lives thinking they're fighting against themselves, because it sounds like a battle in their mind with themselves, and it's not. You can't win when you fight yourself. You are always the loser. Even if you win, you're the loser. You can't win. So you get exhausted from fighting yourself, and then you just give up. And I know that's what happened to me. I got to a place where the biggest enemy lie I believed was, Jessyca, you will have peace if you just stop fighting. You've been in all these hospitals, you've had all these meds, you've had all these treatments. You will have peace if you just stop fighting. And that sounded true to me, and it sounded real to me. But the reality is, when you stop fighting, when you give in all the time and you speak in agreement with that enemy voice, and you just say, okay, I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to be fat. For me, that's one of the things I said. I'm like, I'm just going to be fat, but at least I'll have peace. Without resistance, the enemy fully takes over your life completely. And it happens so fast. And you will see yourself go downhill until you're unrecognizable. So, yes.
Everything you're hitting is hitting at home. And I resonated with it completely, and I see it all day. There's a lot of ways to describe it. The lies we tell ourselves, the lies we've convinced ourselves, and the lecture that I had at the cruise, brought out each one of those voices, and there's so many paradigms that can be completely taken over by the enemy.
Yes.
For me, the enemy is food addiction. And the paradigms are like, emotions cannot be always trusted when it comes to food, right? Your logic cannot be trusted when it comes to food. Your outlook, your mentality, how you process self-blame, right? And the way you advocate for yourself, all of these things, when it comes to an addiction or something that's been rooted in your life since the age of 4, you can't trust it. And it's so hard to navigate. And so many people in my clinic, they come to me and they are lost. They don't know what they're fighting. And what you're doing, right? What you're doing is you're trying to help them understand, this isn't you you're fighting. You've been fighting it. It's not you. And it's such a great, approach. Sorry, Brian.
No, I think along what you're saying, and I think that was the amazing thing at the low carb cruise that first day. Like, it was like we all got together and we planned this story, and they all built upon each other, right? And you laid the foundation. I was right after you, which was my bad luck. I had to follow you, but then, one person after another was really hammering these points home, and you started saying, wow, I mean, in Tro, we were having that discussion. How much is personal responsibility? How much is addiction? How much is that just getting the information? Then if you have the information and you don't act on that, whose problem is that? That becomes your problem with that. That's huge accountability. And I think the other important part of what you're talking about is, you went through life stresses, but your brain was not under the control of the addiction at that point. For instance, if I'm drunk and then I'm going to make bad choices, that's why we don't drink and drive. That's why we don't, that's why we go to happy hour and drink a bit, then we'll forget it. I'm going to have the pizza now. So, being able to clarify the brain and get your brain away. And Tro and I've been talking about this for years is, 2 or 3 weeks in, a lot of people say, you know what, I skipped lunch and it was no big deal, or I didn't have
Right.
any, like, I'm not under that. Like, I don't feel like I have to have that anymore. That addiction seems to get better the more you're on track.
Yeah. So one of the things that I experienced that really was life-changing, because I had done every diet, I had done all the therapy, I'd done the hospitals. I mean, literally every diet. If you can name it, I did it. If there was a pill or a shot, I did it, but I always rebounded. And I had even done low carb back. I did Atkins back in the late 90s. It was it had a hot moment there. And it was, I did Atkins back in the 90s. But it was a little bit different than keto. What happened with keto that made everything different for me was my brain was nourished. I had actually some pretty good therapy and even some decent things that I had learned in hospitals, because my brain wasn't well. And 14 of those years that I was sick, I was a vegetarian, and I had lots of like soy and tofu and things that I now realize made it much worse. But what happened at the time that I began to heal was there was this beautiful marriage of health in my brain, physically getting healthy because I allowed myself to eat fat. I mean, that was a huge thing. It was like I knew so much about nutrition and health and diets and calories and all these things, but I could not apply it to me until I started to heal my brain with the right nutrition. And so you have to have both. If I can teach somebody about the way they think, they can hear me, but they can't act on it unless their brain is better first. And so a lot of times I do ask people to deal with the food first. Like, let's get the inflammation out of your body. Let's get your brain functioning right. And then you'll be able to receive this message about strongholds and how important it is, the words that you speak, and all these other pieces, because you can hear a good message, but if you can't move on it, if you can't apply it to yourself, it's not about willpower. And you may be someone who says, I take personal responsibility in every area of my life, but I haven't been able to do this. It may be because you're eating things that are causing your brain to not be able to function in a way that you can apply it to you. I know that was the case for me. In 2 months, 41 years of mess cleared up in my mind. Like, it started 2 months in, and I was like, what is this? What is this? Something is different. I've never experienced this.
Hey, Jessyca, can you share because I think it's really powerful, the story of the guy who was eating in his car all the time and how you helped him? I mean, I think that's will explain strongholds to people pretty, I think, okay, clearly.
So I talk about revelation because I really do think freedom comes in layers. It isn't just something all of a sudden you know the truth and then your life gets good and easy. One of the revelations I've had in the last 2.5 years that I've kind of been out of the public is that there is a huge difference in emotional eating and compulsive eating. Emotional eating is triggered by a feeling, any feeling, happy feelings, sad feelings, lonely feelings. Compulsive eating is triggered by environment. It is triggered by familiarity. It can be triggered by the clock. It's triggered by your senses, your physical senses. Now, for many years as a teacher and coach, I treated all emotional eating events the same. I said, you know what? You got to figure out what the emotion is, meet the real need, and then you won't act on it. Because if I'm dealing with anger, I need to acknowledge the anger, find an outlet for the anger, and then I won't eat over the anger. So I was treating it that way. And I had this client, and he worked as a nurse at a correctional facility, 3rd shift, and his job was stressful. But he had this habit. He would tell me, hey, I'm doing great. I made it through all this stress at work. And then on his way home from work, he would go to Wendy's, buy a ton of food, binge in his car before he got home. And it happened. And so for weeks, I'm like, okay, how are you feeling at work? What happened? And there came a point where he was like, you know what? Nothing. It was a perfect night. There was no stress. I was good. It was just normal. I just got in my car and I just felt like I had to go. And it hit me in that moment. This has nothing at all to do with feelings. Compulsion is based on your senses and environment. So for him, just setting foot in a vehicle turned on the compulsion to go to Wendy's, because he had done that so many times. The car itself had been the scene of secret compulsive eating. So simply by getting into his car alone, that set off that message, that enemy message in his head. You got to go to Wendy's. You got to stop by Wendy's. There's no feelings attached. It's just this compulsion. You got to go to Wendy's. You got to stop by Wendy's. And so that's when I realized we have to treat this completely different. You can't meet a need when there is no need. He didn't have an emotional need. So instead, I started to have him say, as he was leaving work, as he's walking to his car, I don't eat in my car. I never eat in my car. I don't eat in my car. Never, ever do I eat in my car. He texts me, I never eat in my car. And of course, he thought this was weird. But I'm like, you got to say it out loud. You have to hear yourself say it. And so he did it. He's like, I made it all the way home. I didn't stop at Wendy's. This is great. And I'm like, okay, there's something here about we believe what we hear ourselves say. And the way to break off that old message of getting in my car alone is tethered to the behavior of secret eating. Record a new message. That new current message will override of when you're in your car alone, this is an opportunity to go and secretly binge and eat. And so he did that for weeks, and he found that it was working. And it was so in the forefront of his mind at that point that his wife gets in the car, they're going somewhere, and she's like, hey, can we stop at so-and-so fast food place? And he's like, I don't eat in my car. I never eat in my car. And she's like, since when? But that new recording had taken over, and it replaced that recording of it. And it is like a recording because it repeats, that thing, that voice that hammers us. It doesn't just say one time, go to Wendy's. It says, go to Wendy's, go to Wendy's, go to Wendy's, go to Wendy's. But it proves that speaking out and recording a new message can overcome and shut that down very, very, very quickly. And it will be there for you when you need it. And so since then, I learned that for people, when they're describing these problems that they're having with food, when they intended to do one thing and they wound up doing something else, the first thing I do is figure out, was it emotional or was it compulsive? Because if it was emotional, we want to say, what was the emotion? What was the need? In the future, when you feel that way, how can I meet that need? With compulsion, we have to figure out, what is the enemy saying? What is that enemy voice saying? And then what can you counter it with? You can get ahead of it. You literally can get ahead of it and say, like he did, before I ever set foot in the car, I'm speaking over it. I'm saying it. I believe the words I hear myself say.
I want to stick on that a little bit. Even emotional eating, I would apply to the same exact process that you're using, because emotions are just as fickle as anything else in human nature.
Yes.
And those emotions can be, the easiest way I found with emotions is to evaluate what is the end result of that emotion. Mm-hmm. Right. So like we just all talked about this, the self-blame people say, oh, it's my fault. I'm a dumb. I should do better. Right. That excessive self-blame people feel. Well, what happens next? Well, follow the money. Where does that emotion take you to? Right. A lack of change. That's a stronghold. Right. That's the stronghold. You've evaluated that emotion it's a manipulation.
Yeah.
Or I'm just weak. I just don't have willpower,
Right.
Right.
People, it's harder for me than everyone else.
Anger, stubborn. I'm just stubborn. Right. Look at that emotion. People feel like I'm just stubborn, or being angered and agitated, annoyed. that's not you. Figure out what happens next. Anger,
So I
agitated,
think,
annoyed, stubborn, that leads you to keep the substance, right? It's part of it. It's
yes.
part of it, you know?
Well, I actually have them write that out. So I have them write out those things that are really the enemy voice. They're saying it over themselves. They're coming into agreement with the enemy when they say, I'm just stubborn. And then I have them underneath, they write, I'm just stubborn. But what is the truth? Is that true about you? And I have them think of all the situations where they're not.
It's
not
never true. It's
Yeah.
always the food talking, always.
Right.
You know?
It is always a lie. And so when you hear the enemy lie, and you know, it's the same lies all the time. It's not like there's a bunch of new stuff. It is the same old stuff. And so once you can come up with 4 or 5 truths, and you have identified that this lie is attached to this stronghold, say anger is a stronghold, and this lie is attached to it. This is just who I am. I'm an angry person. And then you are prepared when you hear that to speak truth. I'm not an angry person. People tell me that I'm kind all the time. When you can speak back the truth against that lie, it effectively shuts it down. But it's first recognizing that it is, in fact, a lie, and then be prepared with a list of truths to counter that and speak it out loud. There's nothing more important than saying it out loud, because what typically happens is we hear the enemy's lie and then we speak out in agreement with the enemy. And every sabotaging act, every time we give in and do something we didn't want to do, it requires agreement. We never have to listen to that enemy voice. Never. We never have to. And when people understand, I have to come into agreement with what the enemy's offering me. Like I'm being offered something to help me with my pain in exchange for my authority. Right? So I'm going to give up my authority over my health, over my food, over my future in exchange for what the enemy's offering, temporary pleasure, right? When you realize there's always an exchange there, it takes away the power of that enemy voice, because you never have to come into agreement with it. If you recognize it's the enemy, you speak the truth against it, you don't come into agreement, and then you never act on that thought that you have that's meant to sabotage you.
Yeah, and I think so many of those thoughts, not only from the enemy, but these are thoughts we had since, our parents said, "Oh, you're the heavy one. You're the one who's lazy. You're not as smart as the other kids." And you see someone's life, like, so I think of someone like Ben Carson, who was a D and F student, right? He was happy when he got a D, and then all of a sudden his mom goes, "You're smart. We're gonna use your brain. We're gonna make you read. And someone invested in them to get them on the right path. And it's so hard when, for me, it's hard for me to see the victim mentality. It's really, I struggle with that. Just when people say, well, I just can't exercise, it's too hard, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And it's like, okay, then I can't help you. I can't help you until we figure this out. And it's a hard thing. I have a guy just right now that, he went low carb and keto, but he drinks 8 beers a day. And I'm like, look, we got to fix that problem. You're going to be on insulin soon if you don't fix that part of the problem. Right. So it's such a multifaceted thing. And when you say, I really don't want to go on insulin, though, then here's what we have to do, right? We have to make these changes. If you don't, then you're going to be on the drugs. Like, there's no way around this.
It's the choice. It's the choice.
Choices are so hard, especially when you can't see the long-term consequence. Like, how many people would choose to eat cookies and donuts when they know their foot's going to get amputated in 3 to 5 years, right? And making that choice is really tough. But a lot of times people just don't know what's coming. And that's why all of us are passionate, because we've seen where that ship goes. Right. Like, you don't want to go there. Trust me. It's not going to be a good outcome for you.
Yeah. Well, there's also people that get to the point where they truly are like, I don't care. Like, they are so beat up that they're like, oh, yes, I believe I might lose my foot. I don't care. I can't do. I mean, people really do get to that point, even if they see that outcome. But I think it's because they've gotten to a place where they don't have hope, where they really do believe this is who they are, whether a person in their life spoke it over them, or whether it's that internal voice, they believe that they really can't get better. And even if it worked for someone else, it won't work for them. And so they don't have hope, and they're just resigned to the fact, yes, I'll probably go blind. Yes, I'll go on insulin. And those are the people I think that are the toughest to break through, because they actually do see that future. They do see the outcome, and
they're hopeless.
There has to be a degree of willingness here on their part. You know, and I know you guys are the same. There's people that come to you and there's some part of them that wants to get better, and you want it more than they do. And when that happens, it never works. I mean, I felt like I have drugged people kicking and screaming to truth and health. And the minute you just relax a little bit, you stop pulling them, they're all to pieces again, because you want it and they don't. And people contact me all the time. Can you help my son? Can you help my child? And I'm like, where are they? They want this.
That is massive.
I mean, they're not messaging me for help. And so in my experience, when you do something to please someone else in your life, and it's to appease them because they see that you're in trouble and you're not doing it for yourself, it doesn't stick. I mean, I was the same way. I can't tell you the number of times that I admitted, okay, I'll go to the hospital. You're right. I'm going to die. I'll go to the hospital. So I did that for my parents, for my husband, for other people. But it's not because I wanted to change. I just didn't want them to keep bothering me about it. I didn't want them to worry. I cared about them, but I didn't really want to change or even think it was possible. So there has to be that willingness to do something you haven't done before, or hear a message you haven't heard before, or even being willing to do silly things like talk out loud. That really hangs some people up, and they're missing that piece of it.
Yeah, not only that, and I think the other side of the coin is really hard, because a lot of people think, oh, I'll be the one I could smoke 3 packs a day and I'm not going to get lung cancer. George Burns did it. Look at George Burns. Like, how many other people do you know, right? George Burns also laughed a lot, had a lot. He's a different person than you. But a lot of people think, well, I can have my sugars at 400 and I'm not going to have those problems. Good luck. You're like, the odds are against you on that.
Right. Just because, you can always find a reason to back up the behavior you choose to engage in. You always can. You can find an example of someone else who did it and they were okay. And, I think but that still goes along with, I'm not really willing to do what it takes to change. I don't really want to change. You have to actually get to a place where you want to change, where you are so miserable in yourself that you must, you have to. And that either comes by great inspiration, or it comes with the right information. Both those things can help people change. People hear stories of someone else who changed, they get inspired, maybe I can do it. Or their eyes are open because they start to realize, oh, wow, I really am going to lose my foot. And so information and inspiration are great motivators for getting a person to that point where they're willing to do the first thing they need to do.
One thing there to add on, you talked about a family member, a child, or a parent being brought in by somebody, and maybe they're not ready. And I think the purpose of a good sort of healer, doctor, coach at that moment is to tell them, you are in denial, right? Mm-hmm. You are not ready, right?
Yes.
And I need you to understand, and those people need to know their state.
Yes.
Right? They need to know the state that they're in. Yes. And because what happens is in that state, when they're in denial and when they're not ready, when somebody is pushing them, right, they're actually lowering their confidence.
Yes.
Right? They're not ready.
Yeah, they're not ready. They have to be ready. And even with hypnotists I talk to, and they say, if someone doesn't believe smoking's bad for you, and you go, I'm just doing it for my brother-in-law, or my wife's upset with me, they don't have success. They have to believe, yes, this is bad for me. I want to quit. I'm ready to do this thing. Like, you have to be invested, right? That's exactly what we're all dealing with. You have to be invested in these things. And, the person, you can't just drag someone in and go, okay, heal this guy. And the guy goes,
Right.
I don't even want to be here. I don't want to give up my cookies. Like, I'm not ready. Like, you have to
Well,
respect that. That's huge.
it also creates, anytime someone feels like something's being taken away from them, it builds up rebellion. And then the explosion of rebellion that happens afterwards usually brings that person back to a worse state. For example, when I was, I think, 17 years old, my parents put me in this hospital, and eating disorders hospital, and it was so restrictive, and they put food in front of you and you had to eat it, and they watched you, and then you couldn't purge because they go to the bathroom with you to make sure you didn't. Well, the whole time I was there, guess what? No binging, purging, none of that, even though that was something I did many times a day. I was being completely controlled, but rebellion was building up in me. And as soon as I got out and I had freedom again, of course, I went crazy. I binged, I purged, and found myself worse than I ever was. So when something is when you believe something's being taken from you, or you believe someone else is trying to control you, it does build up rebellion. And what I've seen is people wind up worse than they started in that case. And I think, our job is, and, I'm not a medical professional, but I do believe this is a calling on my life as a coach. And I think our job as with the callings that we have is to deliver truth to people. And then it's up to them whether they decide to use it, act on it. And I always hope that a seed is planted. When they get to a point where they do need it, they'll remember where to come to for help. But yeah, I tend to resist taking on people who are like, I'm not sure. I'm like, well, wait, don't do it yet then. Like go ahead. Maybe things have to get worse for you. I don't know,
Yeah, that's such a huge point. And so many people, this didn't work, but they were never ready to really commit to something, right? I think if you commit to anything, like, you could do better if you give up processed food, right? Even though it may not be optimal, So I think it's so important, all these things that you're talking about. But again, these all come back to these strongholds, these false beliefs that we hold as truths, and that's the hard thing to break through. And that's why I love what you're doing. That's why it impacted Tro. And like, we saw that truth right away when you were talking. It's like, we never really thought about it in that manner. We see it, but you just don't know how to put a word to it sometimes, like what a stronghold. And the opposite of that's a foothold, where these guys are climbing and they get that, they're in the rock, right?
Yes.
And they can grab that next thing, and that someone's helping them, going, okay, go to the left. There's another good. But when you're in the battle, you don't see it, right? Sometimes,
Yes.
like, we've all had bad relationships that everyone else thought was a disaster except us, And so sometimes you need outside voices to tell you, oh yeah, you're off track. You need to go to the left a little bit. You need to stay on course. And they also use these ropes that hold you, so you only fall 10 feet instead of falling all the way down and crushing yourself, right? So I think there's so much of that in what we're talking about. Because what were we discussing? You were asking this question when we were on the low carb cruise. It was more like, once you give them the information, whose responsibility is it? Like, once you, not like we would say from a biblical standpoint, once you know the truth, you're kind of stuck. Because the truth. If you don't know the truth, no one ever teaches you. You don't know the truth.
Well, so my question was a little bit more nuanced, but I know what you're saying. I can't tell you how many people I've you know what? Actually, I want to bring this up with you, because I know both of you are people of faith, and so and I want to sort of get your opinion about this. I have never, not once, questioned my belief that somebody coming to me wanted to heal. Not once. Right? I have never, not once, questioned that somebody really, really wanted it. They wanted it, right? That's how I've operated. That's how I do better with my mindset, is like putting the, is just lowering every voice of judgment in my head.
Sure.
And making it completely muted.
Yes.
And the one time where I felt that, like, somebody just didn't really want it. The one time it happened, I discovered the truth, right? Maybe a month or two later. You know, I won't go into the exact story because, but you know, certain things happened which really made me question my faith in this person's desire to go after and go get their health in order. And then what I found out was this person was under an incredible amount of stress and just wasn't ready. A stress that I cannot even think, and I don't want to even, I can't even relate to. That's how bad it is. Right? Incredible loneliness, incredible despair, incredible, you know,
hopelessness.
And when she finally opened up, it all made sense.
Yeah.
It all made sense. And I've never at one point ever felt justified in my judgment. But the question I had asked on that cruise, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about this, was if we, you know, it's not just the knowledge, it's that insight, right? Can we really give that? Because these strongholds, right, they're hard to really understand.
Yes.
It's not just, you know, low carb feeds your brain. It's not just like that information. It's not just you're a food addict. It's not just that food addiction is manipulative.
Yes.
Right. But there's insight there that could take a lifetime to learn.
This is this is why I have this is why I have clients for years. I know somebody on the cruise asked the question, like, how do you choose a coach? And then one of the coaches answered, well, you know, if you have them for more than 30 days, then you're not a good coach. And I thought, that's not the truth, because many of these things come in layers. And most people, if they have lifelong issues, you can help them with their food in 30 days. They can have life-changing things, but uprooting lifelong false beliefs, it happens over time. It happens literally gradually in layers. And I talked about authority, like every time you speak the truth, it's like chopping away at that stronghold that has grown. And the calling I think that we have is speaking truth to people, and then them learning how to speak that truth for themselves in their life to the point that it becomes real and it is true. And to your point, I don't think, what I truly believe is that people do want to get well. They get really tired of trying and failing. In the very innermost part of every person, they want to live, they want to thrive, they want to believe that something could work for them. But because they are so beaten down by years of trying and failing, it's easier for them to just say, yeah, I'm not really ready, or I don't think I can do it. So I think in their heart of hearts, yes, every person that's alive really wants to stay alive, or they wouldn't be. I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah, and I would say, I would add to that. Here's how I see it. So I talk to a lot of people go, you know, I wanted to be a doctor. Well, why didn't you? Well, I couldn't afford the school. It was too much. You have to study all the time. You have to miss Christmas. You have to go do this. You have to work in the hospital for 5. Yeah. Everyone wants to do it, but then you go, here's what you have to do to be a doctor. And then you go, okay, I'll do something else. Right. And it's all that. It's like, I want to be in better shape, but then you have to work out. You have to do this. You want to run a marathon. You don't just run a marathon. Right. You have to train for that. You have to, I don't want to do all the training. Like, I just want to be the professional quarterback. Well, you have to study all these plays and stuff. Right. There's more to it than just going out there and throwing the ball. So I think a lot of people, you want to do it and it sounds good, but then when you go, oh, I have to do all that stuff to make it happen. Okay, forget it. Right. I'm not going to give up certain things. Like the guy, he doesn't want to give up alcohol. Like, well, then you're going to go on insulin. There's not anything else we can really do. So I think it's hard because as an example, a friend of mine's a multimillionaire and all these people come to him and say, can you mentor me? And it's like, sure. Here, read these 3 books that really impacted me and get back to me. He said, not one of them has read the 3 books and got back to him. Like, how much do you want to do this thing? Like, if you want my help, you have to invest. You have to, you know, if you're in a Bible study and you want to learn the Bible, you have to do your homework in between whatever, right? To learn those scriptures or learn whatever you have to. And the people just don't put the effort. And they go, oh, I didn't have time this week to do that. Like, how bad do you want it then? So I get it.
Want it.
Yeah.
They just want like an easy word. Like, tell me real quick how to get well. Like, tell me real quick, how did you transform? And the reality is there are steps and stages, and it takes a long time, and nobody wants to hear that. weight loss doesn't always take a long time. Sometimes it does, but to truly transform, it takes years. And I tell people that they want to know, like, how fast did you do that? I'm like, years. It took years to go from what I was to what I am. But it happened all along. There's always something happening. If you will move towards the thing that you want, if you will move towards it, something is always happening, even when it looks like it isn't. And the next thing you know, you look back and you're like, oh, wow,
100%. You gave us a plug. We're changing our name in the practice here in the app to Toward Health. So, because of exactly this, you're going towards something at all points.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
I would say you're either going backwards or you're going forwards. Nobody ever stays the same. And so I use that, when people get on the scale and they get frustrated because they're like, nothing's changing. I'm like, yes, it is. Every good decision you make, you're either moving towards health, fat loss, whatever, or you're sliding backwards, because people get on the scale and get frustrated because it doesn't say what they want. And then they'll do something sabotaging, because the scale can be a stronghold. It is a lying liar sometimes.
Well, and also I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you go ahead.
Well, and the stronghold, the way I was seeing it too, like your talk really made me think a lot about what is a stronghold. A stronghold's like an old fort. It used to be protecting you back in the day, right? When you went in and had those cookies when mom and dad were fighting, and you went in your room and you got this peace. But that stronghold, you can't, if you sit in that fort and it's broken down around you now, it's not protecting you like you thought it was, but you can't move forward. Right. You can't move forward. Now, when you have foothold, now it's like you're armored up and ready for battle, right? You can move forward now. You have to leave that stronghold and move forward if you want to advance, right? And I think that's what happens to us.
And really, strongholds are, and I don't think I've said this today, but I did on the cruise, strongholds are areas of vulnerability that they leave the door open for easy access for the enemy, right? So we all agree we have these enemy thoughts, right? But a stronghold is an area that gives the enemy an unfair advantage. So that's the important thing I talked about. It's like the face mask penalty. When a very small football player can pull down a great big guy if he grabs him by the face mask, it gives him an unfair advantage. The enemy can grab hold of that stronghold that is built up, and it gives him an unfair advantage over you. All of a sudden, those enemy thoughts are overwhelming, and you can't even hear yourself, the true you. And so I think it's important that the reason we want to, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons we want to identify, call them what they are, identify those strongholds, is because when you get in that state, let's say if I know the scale is a stronghold in my life, because when I step on it, it tells me what I'm worth. It tells me, that I'm not doing the right things. I fall into deceptive, horrible, destructive behavior. When I step on it, I can expect that the enemy is going to start to pull on that thing to try to bring me down. But once I've identified it and I've recognized what are the lies that I hear when I'm dealing with that stronghold, and then I speak truth over it, I am going towards something. I am moving towards something. I don't care what the scale says. I made good decisions. I burned fat all day yesterday because I was fasting. You're speaking these truths out, and it breaks off. Eventually, every time you speak, it breaks that stronghold off. So then the enemy can no longer grab hold of it to pull you into destruction.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, this is we've kind of reimagine what we're doing on Low Carb MD, but this is exactly so important, these kind of ideas and topics. But, because you're going to hear all the debate here, don't eat green beans, don't do this. And really it's going to come down to these strongholds and what we hold to be true, right? And believing in something and moving forward, and so I think there's so many of these ideas that are so important that can help so many people. And it's, a lot of people I talk to, Tro, and they'll go, well, gosh, I feel like you're my psychologist now. Like, that's a big part of what we do. It's psychology. It's how we think. It's how we see stuff.
Yeah.
It's these strongholds. It's these false beliefs. Because so many people will say, I'm just dumb. And you're like, well, didn't you just write this paper? Didn't you just do this one? Like, how could you say that? Well, because my mom said that, or this person said that. And it's like, and some people get really offended. I think kind of when you know the truth about yourself, it doesn't matter what other people say, unless it's constructive criticism, right? But if someone's just bringing you down, just go, I know that's not true, right? I'm not going to like get my whole day upset by someone who says something that's not the truth. Or sing it and say it is the truth. Let me work on that.
Right. You know what? You know why I love the new name? Because so many people are running from something. They're trying to get away from something. I'm afraid of food addiction. I'm afraid of sugar. Anytime we are operating in fear, we're looking over our shoulder like that thing is chasing us down, and we're likely to stumble. If I have my face turned toward my goal, I am not looking back. I'm not running from anything. I'm not afraid of something that I'm trying to get free of. I'm simply got my eyes locked in on where I'm going. I'm not going to stumble because I'm looking where I'm going. And that name is just inspired. I love it.
100%. I mean, we're excited, and we got a great group, and Brian's been so helpful, and using the app and helping out, and just it's this podcast and meeting all the people we've met. It's just been absolute amazing, and I can't wait for next year for the cruise. I can't wait again. Alaska's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And it's amazing. I think like what you're saying too is toward health is like, okay, enjoy the journey. It's just like, I think about it as, when you have kids, like they'll go, oh, that kid started talking a month before mine. Well, we all end up talking or whatever. Like, who walked first, and everyone's all upset. Like, why did my kid taking so long to walk? Or why is it that we all get to the same place, right? So it's just staying that like toward health, keep going forward, right? Not. But sometimes that fear of looking back, when I look at, I'm giving a talk for Tro tomorrow. But looking at the research, the people who had success, they were leaving from something bad. Like you think about the Mayflower, people got on that ship because either they were going to get killed and thrown in jail where they were, or they said, I could get a better life out there. Either way, It's moving you forward, right? But the problem is if you don't know why you're doing it, or if you lose that fear, because if someone just got diagnosed with diabetes, they're my best patient because they're like, what do I got to do? I don't want to be diabetic. I saw what happened to mom. I don't want that. But then you forget that after a while and you go back to your like after someone has a heart attack, they're like clean eating for 6 months, then they forget about the pain they went through, right? So when you forget, that's when you get on a danger course. And so, but either going towards something or away from something, right? So a lot of people, it's because they had to wear the seatbelt extender. They go, I'm not doing this anymore, right? Or they said, I want to look better when I'm at my beach pictures and I want something positive. So either way, it's a motivation, right? But we have to remember why we got on that ship, because if we forget, as soon as we hit that first storm, we go, forget it. Take me back to the port. I'm going back to where I know, even though it sucks there, right? Because it's easier. Yeah. So I think it's just amazing. Like I thank you so much for just bringing up this idea of strongholds and how these lies that we believe over and over, and because all the knowledge in the world isn't going to overcome those strongholds. And I think that's what we're talking about, Tro, is that you could read all about golf, but you have to go out there and hit the ball at some point in the wind and see how things are. You can't just read everything and think you're an expert. So, and it's also what happens. I see a lot of people never get started because they're like, well, Tro says this, Brian says this, Sean Baker says this, Jessyca says this. I can't even start. Right. So get on a path and go, it's not working. Okay, let me try what Tro's saying and see if that works better for me. And being able to, on the fly, make these course corrections. That's so critical.
Right. I tell my wife all the time, try what I'm saying, try it my way. It doesn't seem to, anyway.
Yeah, it's not going to work with your wife. You can't be the messenger, right? If Jessyca says the same thing, then she'll go, this is brilliant.
I'm just going to get Jessyca to say it, because my wife saw her talk. She was like, oh my gosh, Jessyca is so inspirational. And I'm like sitting there all jealous. I'm like, this has been doing for the last 7 years of my life. Jessyca, I know how much I loved your talk.
Tro changed his talk after hearing yours, right?
Yeah.
Like he goes, that's it. Rip up these pages. I'm going to talk differently.
Yeah, I took the science out. I was like, let's get to the human element. We have to uncover it, because Brian said it yourself. Like Brian said it perfectly. All the knowledge in the world means nothing unless you can figure out how to apply that to your life.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'll get biblical one more time, right? It's like Paul, he goes, I know what I should do. I know what I shouldn't do. I do what I hate and I don't do what's good. And why did I do that? That's an
Right.
age-old question. Like, I know I shouldn't be eating that thing and I still do. So many people that like that's the thing. It's like I knew I shouldn't eat that Twinkie, but dang it, it was there and I was hungry and I was tired and I just did it. Right. I knew I shouldn't the whole time. So it's not just about the knowledge, it's like looking at the voyage we're on too.
Well, I'll get biblical too. And there is a verse that says you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. But what I learned about that is because I do teach truth, I preach truth. I mean, that is what I feel called to do, is to impart truth into people's lives, but they're not all free. So hearing the truth does not actually make you free. Hearing the truth opens a door to freedom. I picture it like a bird on a cage, like just tightly grasping its little swing. And the truth is like opening the doors to that cage. So I'm set free, right? I've heard the truth, I'm set free. But if I want to be made free, I actually have to act on that and I have to let go and I have to go through that door. So hearing the truth sets you free, but it doesn't make you free. Acting on the truth makes you free.
Amen. Can't get any better than that,
sure.
bro.
Yeah, well, I can actually. I can. No, I can't. But I can. I'm going to give the credit to my father. What you just said resonated so much with me. It brought me to my childhood. I remember my father telling me experiments they did with fruit flies, where they put the fruit flies in the jar, and they put the lid on the jar. And the flies would just go up to the lid, go up to the lid, go up to the lid, and come down and come down and come down and come down and come down. And when they took the lid off, the fruit flies wouldn't go out.
Mm-hmm.
They would go to the lid and come back down. They would go to the lid and come back down. And information is sort of like that lid. You can open that lid up, right? And now we got to go pick in and get those flies out of there.
Yeah.
We have to go, and that's where coaching comes in, and maybe faith comes in there, and guidance comes in there. Who knows what else there? Love and I don't know, but a lot of things, fear even can get you out of there. But I think that's what we're talking about, right? Is getting people out of just being stuck and controlled.
Yeah.
Set the captives free. Yeah. And that's the thing is so many of us get set free of our shackles, then we put them back on again. Like you just got free of that and you felt that, and then you go and lock yourself up again. Why? Right. And because you don't know any better and you don't have hope to move forward.
Well, you also are stuck in an old identity. That's the other thing I talk about a lot is identity. If I see myself as that, and that's why it's so important to break free from addict identity, acknowledge addiction. Foods are created to be addictive. But if I believe that I'm an addict, I'm constantly saying I'm an addict. Even if I've experienced freedom, when times of stress comes, I go back to what's familiar. So the need to break off that identity of addict is actually really, really important, because once you break off of it, that's when real transformation versus change happens. You can't go back to something that is no longer attached to you in any way. And when you understand that's not your identity, it's not who you are, then you don't pick it back up again. And I think that's that step above temporary freedom. It comes with long-term permanent change is transformation. And there is a difference in change and transformation.
Yeah, and I think it's very similar the way I see like abusive relationships, right? It gets the violence escalates. It starts out with disrespect, then it gets a little worse, and then you get into it gets worse and worse. But people keep going back to that abusive relationship because that's something they know, right? The fear of leaving, of getting out of that horrible, even though it's a horrific situation, takes people years and years sometimes, to really see it. And so I think really just seeking help and asking, say, look, I have a struggle. Let me humble myself a little bit, right? And have Jessyca help me, have Tro help me, have someone. And I think the thing is keeping people on track. And the other thing I think that is the hugest thing I really see as a huge benefit to people is community meetings, like meeting with people, and you're going to have someone inspire you. You're going to have someone that you can help out. And, you know, there's always this chain of people that they'll say the right thing to really help. So when you have a group of people and they're all trying to accomplish the same thing, and you realize you're not the only one who's not eating donuts and cake, right? And then you're part of a community, and that's such a huge thing. And Tro's been instilling that with Toward Health, and I consistently do that with my patients too. And guess what? The people who don't go to the meetings are the ones who are struggling the most. And I go, how about Wednesday? Well, yeah, it's not a good night for me. So, okay, yeah, but I'm struggling, but I'm not going to reach out for help. I'm not. And some of it's personality. Some people want to be hidden, right, and not be part of a group, personality wise. But I think the people who have been on long term are doing great. Like you were saying, 30 days is not enough. Like, you can't just quit alcohol in 30 days and say, okay, I'm never going to drink, unless it's a huge spiritual event or something massive happens. Most people aren't just going to go, oh, 30 days and I'm done and I'll never have to worry about that again. Good luck.
It's a process of unraveling something. It really is. It's something that's knit very tightly, and little by little you're unraveling these things. And again, that takes years. And I think people that have been, I literally have clients that have been with me for years, and I don't feel bad about that because their needs have changed. And honestly, as I've gotten greater revelations of freedom in my own journey, I feel like I'm ahead of them. And I always want to impart that. And so I'm always bringing them up to the new place that I am, because we are all still on this journey. You know, the only thing I think I didn't mention, and I forget what you just said that made me think of it, that I think is really important, is purpose. When we understand that we all have a unique purpose that no one else can fulfill, no one else can fulfill our purpose, that can be the driving thing that can push you through. And I love, my most favorite thing about my testimony is that literally what the enemy tried to destroy me with has become the thing that is used to help people get free. And so I just believe, and I always use fingerprints as an example. If God took the time to give us all individual fingerprints, no one who's ever existed has ever had the same as me, and they never will. It's just evidence right there on our body that each person has a unique purpose in this world. And if you really can grab a hold of that truth and you can get curious about what yours is, that's something that can propel you to want to heal too. Because being sick in your body or your mind, it is a huge distraction from what you're actually created to be. And so I find people who start to get curious about why they're here, and they want to find out, and they see that their strongholds as something that's been a distraction from knowing what that is and fully experiencing it, then they'll want to move forward in breaking off those things so they can experience being in the full of their purpose and their calling.
Yeah, and I say, you know, keep the hope, keep moving forward one step at a time. You're going to get knocked down, get back up, you know, all these things that inspire us, these movies that inspire us. So, Jessyca, how do people track you down if they need a coach? Like, people are going to be listening going, yeah, I think I need help. I'm ready to go. How do people track you down?
So everywhere that you can find me, social media, it's Coach Jessyca, and it's Jessyca with a Y, Jessyca. My friend Mitzi, who was on the cruise, she works for Dr. Barry, but she's like, Jessyca, she's known me for a long time. She's like, you're always saying Jessyca with the Y. She's like, you should make your slogan like Jessyca with a Y, WHY, but which I thought was really cool, because that is a lot of what I do. But it's Coach Jessyca, Coach Jessyca, and I'm on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I have a website. My name is Jessyca Reynolds. You can friend me on Facebook. I am an open book, so I don't care. I do friend people in real life, and I'm always happy to engage and interact with people. I want to mention too, I'm working on a book about breaking strongholds called When Food is a Stronghold. And it's going to be maybe a short thing, but it's going to walk kind of through the process that I take people through and just breaking free of these things.
All right, you have an open invite. You have an open invite to discuss when the book comes out.
Thank you. It's a whole new thing. I've never written anything, so it's kind of a big thing, but I feel called to do it. And I would love to hear from people. I love to talk to people. I do get emails, messages in my inbox all the time, and I always respond to them. And I can't help everybody, but if you're ready, if you're someone who is willing to explore this, if you're curious, I suggest starting off with, I do one-on-one coaching, but I have a group. I do an 8-week group, and it's called Breaking Strongholds. And it's a group of other people just like you who may be struggling with food issues. You can even apply it to other issues in your life. If you're finding yourself pulled into behaviors that distract you from purpose or are destructive.
It's awesome. I know people listening are going to want to participate. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being vulnerable. I know a lot of people in our position have some difficulty expressing that vulnerability, but you expressing it gives me strength. I'm sure it gives you strength, certainly. And I know you really impacted me and Brian in a very positive way. And keep doing what you're doing, and don't lose, you don't need to be a stranger for 2 years from the community. I think, the community accepts you. Keep doing what you're doing. You have a calling. Not many of us understand. I think all of us, when we hear each other talk, we know the other person understands. And there's not many of us in medicine or coaching. And so we need to, I think, make sure that we all keep doing what we're doing so we can help more and more people.
Yeah, and also
thank you so much.
Just want to commend you on that too. On the low carb cruise, when you talked about faith, your beliefs, all those things, and that takes such strength, and it's a scary thing to do. So stepping out in your boldness, I know you have revelation, you have boldness behind you, and I think just doing that inspires me, inspires other people to be able to share what they believe without worrying about offending people or just trying to make the point. I think it's so important that we are ourselves, and we show where our strength comes from or where our joy comes from. And I think it's really important to be able to express that, especially in some of these meetings, just to help people, because there's a lot of people who are of faith, but they're struggling with hope. They're struggling with seeing all the craziness around us right now, and they need a light. And thank you for being that for so many people.
Well, thank you. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity, for the platform to share more, and always glad to hear from anyone who just needs to talk about what's going on with them. And like I said, it's not for everybody, but I know that those who are supposed to hear it will. And I believe in divine appointments, and this is just one of those.
Awesome. Thank you, Tro. Great seeing you again, man.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Jessyca. And thanks to everybody who donates to keep this podcast going. Go to lowcarbmd.com. If you like this, send us a donation. It helps keep us doing what we're doing. Helps keep
Please. The worst thing is when Tro sends me a letter, says you owe this much at the end of the year. I'm like, wait a minute, man. I have to pay to do this thing? But yeah, no, we appreciate the Patreon supporters keeping us from corporate interests and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully we'd bring great people like Jessyca and tell you the truth as we know it. We may change our mind down the road, but right now we're all guns forward.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon by going to lowcarbmd.com.